There is a quiet, emotional world most men live in that they rarely put into words. Not because they are hiding something, not because they are incapable of feeling, but because they often do not know how to translate what is happening inside them into language. And when women try to understand men only by what they say or fail to say, a lot gets missed. Hi, I'm Sandy Hancock, relationship coach. Today I want to talk about what men feel but do not articulate. This is not about diagnosing men, it's not about attachment styles, and it's not about labeling behavior so you can explain it away. This is about the internal experience many men have as emotions deepen, responsibility increases, and real connection becomes possible. Because men are often feeling far more than they are expressing. And those unspoken feelings shape how they show up, hesitate, advance, or retreat. When you understand what is happening internally, you stop guessing. You stop filling in blanks that are not yours to fill, and you relate from a place of strength rather than interpretation. So let's talk about the emotional experiences men commonly carry, but rarely put into words. Let's begin with the most important truth. Most men do not fear intimacy, they fear exposure. Intimacy requires emotional language. It requires naming uncertainty. It requires saying, I do not know what I feel yet, or I am afraid I will fail you, or I do not feel capable of showing up the way you need. Many men were never given permission to speak this way. Instead, they were taught to solve, to provide, to stay in control. So when a man begins to feel emotionally stirred, especially by a woman who is emotionally grounded, something unexpected happens inside him. He does not feel powerful, he feels seen. And being seen exposes gaps he may already feel ashamed of. Here's what many men feel but rarely say. I am not sure I can sustain what you're offering. Not because you're too much, but because your steadiness highlights his inconsistency. Your emotional presence quietly asks a question he may not be ready to answer. Can I show up with the same depth, follow-through, and reliability? When the answer feels uncertain, some men retreat, not to hurt you, but to escape the mirror. Another feeling men often carry silently is this: I like you more than I feel prepared for. Attraction is easy, interest is easy, showing up over time is not. Many men enjoy connection in moments. They enjoy conversation. They enjoy chemistry. They enjoy how a woman makes them feel. But when feelings deepen, responsibility enters the room. Responsibility for time, responsibility for direction, responsibility for emotional impact. And if a man has learned to associate responsibility with pressure rather than purpose, he may begin to pull back just as things begin to matter. What he feels is internal conflict. What you experience is distance. Another unspoken feeling is fear of falling short emotionally. Many men have tried before and know where they struggle. They have been told they were unavailable, inconsistent, passive, or unclear. Rather than learning how to grow emotionally, they learned how to avoid situations where those shortcomings might be exposed again. So when a man senses expectations forming, even healthy ones, he may disappear rather than risk disappointing you. Not because he does not care, but because he does not trust himself. That matters. A man can care deeply and still not be able to show up in a way that is stable. Those two truths can exist at the same time. Another feeling men rarely articulate is grief over who they thought they would be by now. This is one of the most misunderstood dynamics in dating. Some men pull away not because of the woman in front of them, but because being with her brings their unfinished life into sharper focus. Career delays, financial strain, unresolved past relationships, emotional wounds they buried instead of healed. When a man feels behind in life, intimacy can feel like exposure rather than connection. So, instead of saying, I feel inadequate, or I'm not where I thought I would be, he goes quiet, or he becomes vague, or his energy shifts. Another feeling men often carry silently is emotional overload. Women often underestimate how overwhelming it can be for a man to feel deeply without language. When feelings arrive faster than words, men may freeze. They may default to logic, they may distract themselves, they may delay communication. Not to manipulate, but because they are internally flooded. This is where many women begin to overfunction. They explain, they reassure, they hold the emotional center. And without realizing it, the balance shifts. You begin carrying both sides of the connection. Here is what is essential to understand. Understanding what men feel does not mean remaining in emotional uncertainty. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-abandonment. The goal is not to wait for a man to find his words. The goal is to watch whether he takes responsibility for what he cannot yet express. A healthy man may struggle with emotional language, but he does not disappear, does not leave you guessing, does not make you responsible for the emotional direction alone. He may say less, but what he does matches what he says matches what he does. Another unspoken feeling men often have is fear of choosing incorrectly. Choice feels permanent, and permanency feels heavy to men who are unsure of themselves. Some men delay decisions, not because they are indifferent, but because they are afraid of choosing something that they cannot sustain. So instead of choosing and adjusting as they grow, they linger in ambiguity. Ambiguity feels safer than commitment, but ambiguity slowly erodes trust. This is where your self-trust matters. Your role is not to interpret silence. Your role is to respond to behavior over time. You do not need to decode feelings that are not being responsibly communicated. You're allowed to say, I need to know where I stand. You're allowed to notice when effort fades. You're allowed to step back when words and actions drift apart. Understanding men does not require shrinking your needs. Here's the grounding truth I want you to carry. A man's unspoken feelings explain his behavior. They do not justify it. Empathy helps you release self-blame. Discernment helps you to choose well. You're not meant to become fluent in emotional guesswork. You're meant to experience steadiness. The right man does not make you work to understand where you stand. He grows into emotional responsibility with you. And if a man cannot articulate what he feels, but also cannot show up consistently, the most loving thing you can do is stop filling in the gaps for him. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with self-respect. Because love that lasts does not live in confusion. It lives in reliability, responsibility, and mutual emotional presence. If this message touched you, I have a book called Love That Lasts. I will put a link in the description. Thank you.